first, let's go live to Gaza City and join Al Jazeera's Nadim Baba. 49 people now dead, 3 children, as we were saying, among the dead today, Nadim. The sheer number of injured, though, in these attacks must be putting medical facilities there in Gaza under severe strain.
That's right, Adrian. As the airstrikes have continued overnight from Saturday into Sunday and now through Sunday morning, there have been more casualties. The total number of wounded is far higher, of course, than the number killed. It's actually increasing rather more as a percentage. I mean, it was about 10 times. On Saturday, it was about 10 times as many wounded as killed. Now we're hearing that the total number of people killed since Wednesday is 49. I'm waiting to hear an updated figure on the number of wounded to give you a precise figure. But we know that there are a lot of virtually all of the people who have wounded, a large majority, I should say, have been civilians, and many of the casualties are children. But on top of that, as you were just explaining, according to medical sources, 13 children have been killed from those 49. Just in the last few hours, a 1.5-year-old boy was killed in an airstrike, and then before that, there were 2 children killed, 3 on Sunday. So it's a sad situation for children here in Gaza, not only because they're at risk of actually suffering injuries, being killed, but also just the trauma of the blasts which shake buildings, break windows, and really, you know, for children of that age, 2-3 years old, they might not actually understand what's going on, but when they're a bit older, what we're hearing from families is that they really find it hard to sleep if they can at all. It's very little sleep that they get because they're worried if they actually understand that there's a bombardment going on.
We're into the 5th day now, Nadim. What effect is this bombardment having upon daily life there in Gaza?
Well, Darren, if I look around me, there are cars driving around in Gaza City now, a few more than there have been in previous days. But things are still quiet. People are still scared. They've been staying in their homes. I mean, overnight, really, you couldn't see anybody out on the streets. And most of the vehicles you saw were emergency services, ambulances going to the latest scenes of airstrikes. I think people still do think that the Israeli military might actually go to another step and launch a ground incursion. Of course, people are also worried about the fact that they might be near targets of the Israeli military, and they might also be near to a place, often waste grounds, where rockets are being launched into Israel, something that's been resumed on Sunday morning after a brief lull overnight. I mean, just about an hour ago, we saw one rocket being launched a few hundred meters from where I am, and then I saw civilians running away from that area for obvious reasons. They don't want to be anywhere near an incoming Israeli airstrike. Should remind you that there have been Israeli ships bombarding the Gaza Strip as well, and those are believed to have been involved in the strikes on those 2 buildings housing international media channels as well as local Palestinian television, TV stations and radio. The attacks led to one Palestinian cameraman, Hoda al-Zahar, losing a leg, and that's not very far from where I am. So clearly among the journalistic community, the feeling is that there's definitely a danger to journalists who are anywhere near any kind of channel linked to the Hamas government or in any way perceived to be.
All right, Nadim, many thanks indeed. Nadim Baba there reporting live from Gaza. Let's take you now a couple of miles away to southern Israel. Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdel-Hamid is in Sderot. The French news agency Agence France Presse reporting in the last few minutes, Hoda, that Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, says that he's ready to significantly expand the operation in Gaza. Many hundreds of airstrikes on Gaza City, of course. Israel says it's trying to take out the ability of Palestinian militants to fire rockets into Israel. That's obviously having very little effect. Within the last hour, we hear that that rockets have reached Tel Aviv once again.
Yeah, sorry, could you just repeat the last part of the question, because there's actually someone here who was speaking very loudly.
I'm sorry, Hoda. Palestinian missiles or missiles fired from Gaza have reached Tel Aviv within the last hour.
Yeah, absolutely. The Israeli army has confirmed that the Iron Dome defense system has intercepted 2 long-range missiles that were fired from Gaza towards the Tel Aviv area. Now, earlier in the morning, there were also 8 other rockets that were fired from Gaza into the southern Israel area, one of which has actually landed, went through the rooftop of a house in Ashkelon. 2 Israelis were slightly wounded. However, the army says that since this whole confrontation began last week, more than 800 rockets were fired from Gaza towards either southern Israel or Tel Aviv, and indeed one towards Jerusalem. Now, if you compare that to back in 2008 and 2009, the Israeli army at the time had said that only 600 rockets were fired throughout the 3 weeks of that war. So certainly a huge number of rockets being fired, even though slightly lesser today than it was on Saturday.
And what sign of this military build-up, with the Prime Minister saying that he's ready to significantly expand the operation in Gaza? And how would Israel counter the argument that this operation just isn't working? Hundreds of missile strikes on Gaza, and yet still the rockets are landing in southern Israel, being fired out of Gaza.
Well, the build-up is definitely continuing. There's one of the main national roads here just behind me, and you do see a continuous stream of military hardware being deployed to the area. Just for you to give you an idea of where that would be deployed, in the background, those buildings you probably see on the horizon are the Gaza Strip, and then there's that empty space of land in the middle, and that's where the build-up is happening at this point. From what we can witness from where we are, this is still a continuous operation, and probably not everything is already in place. However, there is the question, you had the same scenario about 4 years ago, and then we heard then that the capabilities were seriously diminished in Gaza. However, now you see 4 years later, and there are long-range missiles that are heading towards Tel Aviv, and indeed one towards Jerusalem. So what would that achieve, I think, is a question many people have, even though I have to say the Prime Minister does have a lot of support for a ground operation, certainly here in the southern areas of Israel. What is not really clear is whether Israel knew the full extent of how much long-range missiles does Hamas and other factions have in Gaza. Did they have the proper intelligence? And from what we understand, really, some of these rockets that are being intercepted are also being carefully studied and investigated by the Israelis. Are they trying to figure out, really, are these all long-range missiles that came from Iran, through Sudan, through Egypt, and were assembled inside the Gaza Strip? Or did the factions inside Gaza now learn how to produce them locally? And I think that's one of the biggest questions.